Hi, all things Montessori. I'm so excited for our episode today. I have a really good friend with me today. My friend, Becky Myers-Pollock. She is an incredible primary guide, but we actually talk about the crazy world of infertility and IVF because we both have gone through it together, and now we're both pregnant. I'm a few weeks apart. So we've really been chatting through our whole pregnancies and for a lot of our IVF experience. And I really wanted to tap into what it's like to go through infertility, miscarriage, things like that while you're working in the classroom. I do want to put a trigger warning out. We do talk about miscarriage and pregnancy loss quite a bit in the beginning. If this is triggering for you, just skip through it. Like, I've been there before where I've been listening to a podcast and I've had to turn it off. So I completely understand. I just wanted to give you a warning. Also, for some reason, in the middle of this podcast, my audio decided to make me sound like I'm underwater. It's temporary and it gets better. I don't know what happened, but just, please forgive me. Anyway, I really am excited for you guys to listen to this. And if any of you are going through infertility or know somebody who is, send me an email. This community is so strong, and having the community and the support is really the only way I got through it. So I am there for you. Anyway, please enjoy this special episode.
Well, I'm so excited. I have a dear friend of mine who I've known for a long time. But she's an amazing Montessorian. I have Becky Myers-Pollock with me today. She was the primary lead guide at Fiore Montessori for 7 years. And now she's working as the director of communications at Fiore. So Becky, I'm so happy that you're here.
Yeah, welcome. I'm excited.
Yeah. So today is going to be a little bit of an interesting combination of two things that Becky and I talk about a lot. One being Montessori and two being fertility, infertility, and the world of IVF, because we are both currently pregnant. We both were amazingly fortunate to get pregnant through the amazing thing that is IVF. So we're going to kind of talk about that. And I know that we're not alone. Like, I know that there are other educators and Montessorians out there who have gone through this exact experience. So excited to dive into that. Before we get started with IVF, I ask everybody who comes on the podcast, and I never get sick of it. And I don't even know if I've heard your Montessori story, which is so weird. So if you want to tell us about how you got into Montessori.
Yeah. So I went, my undergrad in college was elementary and early childhood education. So when I was in that program, there was a class or two where our professors gave us the option to observe in a local Montessori school for one of our assignments. And I had known someone growing up that went to a Montessori school, but I didn't know anything about it. I just knew it was different. So I was like, oh yeah, I would love to go check that out. So I went and observed, and literally, I feel like the moment that I walked in, it was like, oh, this is what is missing. Because I think I knew I wanted to work with children. I, since I was a little kid, was interested in being a teacher and working with kids, but there was something about schools or the job of teaching, or I could never really identify it, but there was something that was a little bit off to me that I wasn't fully into. Mm-hmm. And when I walked in there, it was oh, that fixed all of the problems. I, again, still can't put a name to any of it or describe it in words, but just the feeling of being in that school and seeing how they did things was that's what I need to do. So then I took a few years after college where I was doing before and after school programs. I worked in a couple different child related jobs that weren't in the classroom. And a friend of mine, I looked into Montessori, but it's very confusing, right? I sympathize a lot with parents or just people that are interested in learning about Montessori, because it's hard to find what you're looking for sometimes. Yes. In terms of the information and everything.
Totally.
It's overwhelming.
Absolutely.
yeah, so I had like researched it before, but always kind of was like, oh, it's something to look into later. Like I'll figure this out later.
Right.
And then a friend of mine was getting her master's at Loyola University, and she knew I was, interested in Montessori, and she was like, oh, I think I saw something about like that they have a Montessori program and you can get your master's. And I looked into it, and for some reason it was one of those like weird life moments where I was just like, okay, I'm doing that. Like,
I love it.
I'm gonna move, I'm gonna, do this, we'll figure it out. And my now husband moved with me. We lived in Pennsylvania and the program was in Maryland. So we moved there, and the rest is history, I guess.
Montessori has this like universal magical power over people, because the amount of times that I hear that it was a gut reaction, or I mean, even me, I literally was living in New York City and found out about it. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm moving to Baltimore in a month.
Yeah.
Like, it was just like, the amount of times I've heard that is so amazing, because it is so shocking when you see it or you learn about it. It really does sort of, it changes. I mean, it changed my life. I feel like it just opens your eyes in such an incredible way that you're like, I have to know everything about this.
Yeah, it's like you can't go back.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, that's so amazing. I do admit I knew parts of that Montessori story now that you tell it, but I love hearing it all the same. And you did primary. Did you ever think about doing anything else, or were you like primary or bust?
I think when I like initially, like primary was what I wanted to do. I did student teaching, one in it's been so long, I actually forget if it was kindergarten or first grade, and one in sixth grade. And I was like, okay, yeah, sixth grade is not, like, the older kids are not my thing. So, and I've always kind of liked that younger age group. Since doing primary, I've always, like, the moment that they talked about the A to I in my like primary training, I was like, oh, like I just want to know that for like when I have a baby,
same.
right?
Same.
Like that, like I really want to do that. Haven't done it yet, but I would love to. And I mean, elementary is interesting to me too. I just don't know if I have the bandwidth to do that training. I feel like it's so intense.
It's insane.
Yeah.
It's so intense. Yeah, I mean, I think also, I think that all the Montessori levels, it's kind of like a personality test. Like where are you going to fit in the best? Like, I know that like I love 3 to 6 year olds, but it would be really hard for me to be a primary guide. I'm too clumsy, loud, and sarcastic. I don't know. It would just be, I'm not saying I couldn't do it, but it would be hard. I think some of the levels come a little bit more naturally to you, know?
And I've had people tell me that they think, like, based on my personality, that I would do really well with elementary kids. And I don't like disagree necessarily. It's just, for some reason, at least at this point in my life, like it doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Because I'm the same way. Like, I am kind of sarcastic and I like to be like joke around, and I always enjoy being able to do that with like the 6-year-olds in primary, right? Like, I'm like, okay, yeah, you're like at the right place. I can kind of do a little bit of this with you, and it's fun. And
totally. Well, switching gears a little bit. So we've heard your Montessori story. Now I kind of want to get into what we're here to talk about, which is the world of, I'm going to say fertility, because infertility seems like so negative. Like it's not, but it sort of seems like you can't do it. Like, nope, you're infertile. I'm going to talk about the world of fertility. So if you want to just sort of quickly, or I mean, it doesn't have to be quick, but tell your story of, in as much detail as you want, no worries, of fertility, and then how you got to IVF.
Yeah. I feel like I could talk about this for like ever. So stop me if I'm going on too long.
No, me too. I get it.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I mean, I have always wanted to be a mom. Like, even when I chose early childhood education as my undergrad. I would say this to people sometimes, but in my own mind, I would always be like, well, and even if I don't do this, like, it'll help me when I'm a mom. Like, it's sort of how I viewed a lot of choices in my life. And that's like kind of, always been like, okay, like that is the one thing I know I want to do is have kids. But I also, on the flip side, and it's strange to like look back at, I always, when I would talk about having kids, I would like preface it with if I'm able to, which I feel like most people don't think about that. Like most people just assume like, yep, when I'm ready to have kids, I'll have kids. But for some reason, like at least maybe I didn't do it when I was younger, but like college or even older high school age, like I remember saying that to people. So I don't know if it was like an intuition, like I just felt like maybe something would be difficult about that journey for me or whatnot, because I didn't have any like signs or symptoms that would be the case. But anyway, so when my husband and I got married, we were like, okay, yeah, like we're ready to have kids. And I like dived into all this research and like loved learning about like birth and pregnancy and all those kinds of things. And, time went by, it had been like a year, and they suggest, like if you haven't gotten pregnant after a year to, go to your doctor.
Right.
So I went to the doctor and they suggested like, oh yeah, you could go to like infertility specialist and kind of look into that if you'd like. So we did, but when we went, we found out we had zero insurance coverage. And at the time, like we didn't have money to like be paying for all of the testing and all that stuff. So we kind of put it on the back burner. And we're like, well, we'll either, be actively trying or just see what happens, like just let it go. So for like years, I mean, I think it was 5 years almost, we kind of just were like, when it happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, it doesn't kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then we reached a point where, I was into my 30s and kind of like, well, like if we want to do this, like we should probably start thinking about whether we want to pursue like fertility treatments or whatnot to explore this more. So we did, and we still didn't really have very good insurance coverage, which is like a big problem.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel very fortunate that I have family that was able to help us and things like that along the way, because like, I mean, I got really emotional when we were offered some, financial help, because it was like, there are so many people out there that hearing that would just mean, okay, you're not having kids.
Right.
And that's hard.
It puts it puts things in a completely different perspective for me.
Yeah.
Like, you wonder why people don't have kids maybe later, and it literally was mind blowing. It like shattered my world.
Yeah.
When I realized how hard it is, how expensive it is. And if you can't make it work, I mean, there are tons of options, like there are payment plans, there are loans, like there are lots of things, but
it's insane. It really is. You do like the blood work, and there's like the HSG and, all those different testings. And so through that, we found out there were multiple issues with why I was not getting pregnant. So for one, I had like low AMH, which means
me too.
Yeah. So and for people that don't know that, it's kind of an indicator of like how many eggs you have, or how many your body is releasing each month. And so if you have a lower number, it's just sort of less likely on any given, cycle that you'll get pregnant. So, and then in terms of IVF and things like that, you'll probably get fewer eggs to work with once you're trying to make embryos and things. So I had that. And I also had a blocked fallopian tube. So I had to get surgery to have that. It was either to be unblocked or removed. It ended up needing to be removed.
Did you have any pain associated with that? Do you have any idea? That's so interesting to me.
And
because I would have thought like a cyst or something would have, like, I just think that's crazy
You would have no idea.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. It's so weird. And it's even weirder because like if you Google or like if you look up like causes, like why you might have a blocked fallopian tube, like none of them applied to me. So I like still have no idea like what might have caused. Yeah. So who knows? And then my husband also on his side had like a couple of issues as well. So across the board, it was like, all right, this makes sense, right? That it wasn't happening. And essentially, especially with the blocked tube, like the only option is IVF. I mean, there's probably like a tiny like point something % chance of getting pregnant with all of our things combined.
Right.
So it was sort of like, okay, like that's your option, which in a way was freeing because it was kind of like, we don't have to make, like the only decision is are we going to do this or are we not? Right.
Yes.
Like it didn't have to be, okay, do we want to start, you know, with a lower intervention and kind of work our way up or, you know, anything like that. And it was also just nice to have a reason that this hadn't been working before. Like I think, you know, a lot of people get diagnosed with just like unexplained infertility. And I feel like that is so much harder because
really hard. Yeah.
You're just like, why? Like, why is this not working? And
totally.
So in a way, I feel like thankful that we had, you know, this very clear kind of path that we were going to have to follow. So we just decided to do it. We're like, yep, all right, we're going to do IVF. And I had to have the surgery first before we could like start, you know, our first round. And for
was
some
that
reason,
more of a procedure? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No.
Was that more of an intensive procedure than what we go through with egg retrieval? Was it more so not as quick turnaround? Like you had a little bit.
Yeah, it's a laparoscopic surgery. So
gotcha.
Yeah, the recovery was, I mean, terrible. It's a recovery. You're down. I probably like 2 weeks before I went back to work after 2 weeks, but even still, it's probably a good month before you're feeling like, oh, I'm totally back to normal. And that first week, like, I mean, I couldn't get up and down. Like my mom came and stayed with us. My poor husband got COVID. Like,
oh my God.
He was like isolated away. And it was just me and my mom.
Well, the reason I asked that, and for everybody, and we're going to get to this, but listeners, if you're not, you know, versed in the IVF world, there's a lot of procedures that you have to go through leading up to IVF. There's a lot of invasive things that happen to you. So I'm just sort of putting in perspective that before you were even doing the egg retrieval, you were already your body was already undergoing something invasive, something stressful. So I just wanted to kind of put that in perspective of how hard this journey is.
Yeah. So I had one of the other kind of diagnostic things that you have to do throughout IVF is a saline sonogram, where they're checking your uterus, making sure it, you know, is clear and looks good. And it's a procedure that's supposed to be pretty simple, straightforward. They tell you there's really no risk. And I ended up developing an infection from it. And like the doctors wouldn't believe me because
oh my God,
they're like, well, it's saline. Like you can't get an infection from it. Ended up like being admitted for 24 hours, like needing all this medication and all these things. It was a mess. But so I'd had that in December. And then the surgery happened in January. And yeah, I mean, that was the surgery was fine. It was an intense like week and a half. And then you're kind of, you're doing all right. So after that, kind of on my next like cycle, we started our IVF process. I don't think a lot of people know, like there's a different protocols that you can have. Like everyone doesn't do the same thing for IVF. And I think like you and I had different.
I mean, you'll have like different medications or like you'll sort of like you were on birth control, right?
I was not. I did.
Me either.
Estrogen.
Okay, it's somebody else I'm thinking of.
The same.
Right? No, I was never on birth control. I did estrogen instead, like estrogen patches, and it's like it's like very similar. It's like doing all the same stuff, but it's just depending on one, your diagnosis, and two, like your body and things like that, and it all achieves the same goal. But that is another part of this whole thing is, IVF, there's so many things you have to get to do it
Yeah.
because you're essentially opening a hospital bay in your own home with
Yes.
like needles and
It's crazy.
sharps containers and everything. I mean, it is just so wild.
Yeah, it's one of those, like, it's so funny that they just let you do it. Like,
I know.
like,
I remember.
yep, you'll figure it out. Like,
Oh
you
my
got
God.
this.
Xander and I were like, we are not qualified. Like, what are we doing? I mean, and then like, but you do realize that it is so well put together. It's hard to fail. It's hard to
Mhm.
mess it up.
Yeah.
There's a lot of room for error. And I really appreciated that because you're already so stressed out. The last thing you want to do is, mess something up. And most likely the people that are doing IVF, they've either been trying for a long time or they are just ready to have a baby. So they're on top of it. Like, I just
Yeah.
feel like everyone is like pretty type A when you're going through IVF.
Right. Yeah, you have to be like organized.
Have to be.
Yeah. And that was something I actually was like, I think when you're getting ready for something like this, like your brain picks things to be like excited about. Like I got very into like, oh, like I'm going to make my little schedule for myself and, get this thing and that thing and like have it all organized. And that was kind of like exciting to me. Like I was like, yeah, this will be fun. And I think my biggest sort of taking a step back with looking at IVF, my biggest fear like going into it was all of the like shots and needles, right? Like I was someone as an adult, I avoided any injection. But what's so funny about IVF is like that's not the hard part.
No.
Like that part actually is not bad at all. And I'm sure, there's a wide range of experiences, not to say that that's the case for everyone, but it's pretty simple. It's nice. There's a routine. You're like in control. The injections themselves don't hurt that bad. Maybe
the needles are small. It's
Yeah,
not too
like,
bad.
Right.
Menopur, yeah, that's the one that burns. Menopur burns. Yeah, that's right. I remember that.
But it's the part after that that is the hard part. And so our first round, we did all the injections. My husband would do them. He became a pro. Like,
oh, so sweet.
Doing great. Yeah. And then, you have egg retrieval, which I wasn't nervous for. I think most people get nervous about the anesthesia you're put under for them to do that procedure. And essentially they're just going in there and taking out all the eggs that you've built up over the week or two. We knew I wouldn't have like a ton, like that's sort of, again, with the AMH. And the whole time you're being monitored, you're getting blood work all the time. That's more needles. You're doing ultrasounds. So you have an idea of like how many eggs they're going to get, right? So I'm blanking. I think I had 9 eggs that first time. And then you're just waiting.
The waiting is the hardest. Yes.
That's where the hard part comes in.
I agree.
It's so emotional and I was not like prepared for that.
No, it feels like life or death. At least it did for me.
Yeah.
Like it literally felt like the most important. I mean, I've never felt that on edge or anxious about anything.
Yeah,
I think ever.
It was so hard. And not that I'm not an emotional person. I actually think I'm a very emotional person, but I usually do a good job of controlling that or kind of like putting it into perspective for myself. And then in the end, it seems like I'm not that emotional. But for this, like I couldn't, like it was too much. And I was like, it was all you can think about. And our results weren't super great. I mean, it was fine, but we ended up not really having any embryos that reached the blastocyst stage, which is like when they would do a transfer. But we had one that was like right on the cusp of being a blastocyst, and we did a fresh transfer, which means they transfer the embryo like 5 days after you do your egg retrieval. So you can either do that or you can freeze them and have them tested and kind of all that. And we decided to skip that and just do fresh. So they ended up transferring. My doctor was like, we'll just transfer this one that's almost there. And then things just got even worse, like emotionally. I feel like I was, like you said, just like an anxious mess, honestly. I have never had that level of anxiety. I mean, I was crying multiple times every day about it. I felt very like attached to this embryo, but not feeling good about it. Like, you know, like not feeling confident, being worried about what was going to happen. It was bad. They call it a beta blood test, and that's when they find out if you're pregnant or not, if the transfer worked.
Which is, I just want to say, which is 2 weeks. No, 10. Mine was 10 days after.
Mine was 10 days too.
Yeah. So it used to be 14, and now they do it around 10. Those 10 days feel like a lifetime.
So long.
I can't even handle it. So bad.
And I wasn't prepared for how hard it would be. Like, I don't know why, but again, I think it's like you think you can understand that a needle hurts. So again, like before you've experienced IVF, like that's what you think is the hard part. That's the part you're like mentally trying to like be okay with. But I was not prepared for like the mental state of that.
Well, also like the needle stuff is the most in control that you feel. So for me, I was like, this is great. Like I'm controlling what I'm putting in my body. I'm seeing my doctor every other day. Like I felt great during that time. And then it's truly like, I mean, that's why like I think IVF and pregnancy naturally are very similar, because it does simply still take a miracle. I'm sorry. Like it's still like, there's no guarantees. There are not, you know, and that kind of worry and stress, while it sucked, was very much kind of, it made me feel like more real about the pregnancy. It wasn't like my doctor was like, you are 100% getting pregnant. If you do all of these steps, like you'll get pregnant. It was like, we don't know, maybe. Like
we're hoping. Right. And so, you know, there's kind of a debate in like the IVF world of whether you should like test at home before your beta. Well, I tested like every day.
I'm the other one. I didn't take a pregnancy test once because I am triggered by pregnancy tests.
Yeah.
And so I was living, which is not typical me to disassociate and live in like, I just wanted to be I wanted to be in denial, because if I was in denial, then maybe I was pregnant. So that's really kind of depressing, but that's where my head was at that point.
Yeah, no, I can get that. Yeah. So essentially, I literally took a pregnancy test like every day of those 10 days. Like I'm waiting for the beta. And I did get a positive pregnancy test and a positive beta. Unfortunately, that pregnancy ended up ending in a miscarriage, and it was kind of this terribly drawn out experience, which totally sucks. And I'm sure, you know, a lot of people listening have maybe experienced that or know someone that has. I keep going back to like, I think my body knew because of how emotional I was. Like I just felt so uneasy, like not confident. They usually have you kind of, you know, take a little bit of a break. So your body can kind of reset after that happens. Because I think I was about 8.5 weeks along. So not too far, but enough in that, like,
enough.
You know, it needs a reset.
Right.
So I ended up going on like a solo trip by myself, up to Massachusetts. Like I kind of took trying to like recover from that seriously, which I think made all the difference, honestly. And I also, because the experience of how my anxiety and my emotions were in that second half, I mean, I was like scared to do it again, because I was like, that was kind of a dark time, and like, do I want to do that again? Like, I know I do, but in the moment, like, that was scary. And so I like put a lot of work into like physically getting into a good place. So like I felt good, like mentally, emotionally, like all of that. I kind of approached like that time in between starting another round as like getting in the best like headspace and like, you know, physically in a good place and all of that. And that made such a big difference.
That's great.
Yeah, like on my mentality. You know, I think my body responded. So then, you know, we did another round. We had to start all over. Yeah, because for people that don't know, so oftentimes you have leftover you have extra embryos that have been frozen, in which case we would have only had to do a transfer cycle to do another, try. Right. But we didn't have any left, so we had to start back from square one. And that got delayed a little bit. We had a procedure that had to happen, and I ended up needing another procedure that kind of just pushed it back a little bit. But in August, we started, and I did that same estrogen priming protocol. So you kind of have like a month before you're starting all the like active injections and whatnot. So that was the month of August. And then in September, we started preparing for another egg retrieval. And I just felt so different. Like even going into that, I just like mentally, I wasn't as consumed by the whole process as I was the first time. I started running. And so like that, I think, was a good like release and distraction. I was like getting kind of into like different food preparation things and like cooking and some of that kind of stuff. So I had some good outlets and other things to be thinking about. I mean, obviously you're still thinking about it a lot. You can't really avoid it. But it just felt so different, like night and day. And my husband says the same thing. Like it felt like no big deal. Whereas the first time it was so like, that was everything we thought of. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so we did, the egg retrieval. I actually had even fewer eggs that were retrieved. I think I had 5, if I remember correctly, or maybe it was 6. But we ended up having 2 like embryos that blastocysts or what have you from that round. And so we were able to do a fresh transfer again on that 5th day. And that one worked. So, yeah. And that's the baby that I'm pregnant with right now. So that was just like crazy. And I just felt, again, like so different from, I mean, you're still nervous. I think I cried like the night before I got my first positive pregnancy test, because I was like, this just isn't going to work. There's no way.
Sure.
And had like moments. But I just felt so much different this time. Like it felt, I was still nervous, all of that, but I wasn't this ball of anxiety and worry and like sadness like I was that first time.
So now that we've gone through your IVF journey, which like, damn, like that was, it's also hearing it again, there's just so many steps, so many things, right? So while you were going through that, you were in a school environment. So how was that? Did that impact you at all? Was it comforting? Was it triggering? Like,
yeah, it's so interesting. I think actually for the most part, I found it kind of comforting. I think I've noticed in multiple situations in my life, like being around little children is like such a positive distraction. Like when things are like not going well or you're sad or whatever, like, especially a role like being a teacher where it takes so much of you. It's almost like you can leave some of that like baggage at the door. You kind of have to, right? That's often something we talk about, like having to do as a guide and as an educator. So I think some of that was really helpful, because if I was in the classroom, I was kind of doing this transitional role at the time for at least part of the school year when I was going through IVF. So I was in the classroom and I was also doing it like an admin role outside of the classroom. I was transitioning to passing the classroom on to another guide. But anytime I was in there, if I was having like a hard day, and when you're sitting in an office environment, like you dwell on it, right? Like it's hard to distract yourself. So I honestly kind of found it like refreshing when I would have to be in the classroom, because I could kind of let go of it and have to put, like all of my focus on what was happening in the classroom.
That's a great point. I was also in the classroom leading up to my egg retrieval. And while it was really hard, when I transitioned out of the classroom for my transfer, when I'm working my job I currently work at, where I'm, it's more like corporate, it's remote, I'm writing much more like internalized rather than like putting fires out every day. Because sometimes the teaching day goes by so fast, you don't even know what's happening. And I get what you mean. While it was hard because you want to be a mom so badly, like you're seeing parents, children in front of you, it was like weirdly like just so nice to be so busy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can fully understand. And I think maybe I've had like small moments of, like you just said, like you see these children or you see them get to go home to their parents or, all these things. And it's like, when do I get to have that? But I feel like I don't know, I've been able to sort of separate that. I mean, even with like friends getting pregnant and things like that, like, I feel so, badly for people who that affects so strongly. I think for some reason I have been able to sort of separate my like journey from other people's experiences where I didn't quite feel that like jealousy or like sadness when somebody else was able to get pregnant or have a child or whatever. So I feel lucky that like that's how I felt because I know for so many people all of those reminders of what you don't have sort of, becomes really hard.
Oh, I mean, like me personally, like that was really hard for me.
Yeah.
It was weird because it wasn't like everything. It wasn't like every single pregnant person bothered me. It was like specific cases. It was so bizarre. Like, and the mind is just so funny, right? How like it triggered by the weirdest things, but I never felt like that actually with the kids in my classroom or anything like that. Never. I would actually look at them like, you are a miracle. And like, oh my God. And like, that's sort of how I looked at it.
Yes.
Because I was like, wow, like, look at all these. It gave me hope in a weird
Yes.
way. I don't know.
Same, actually. I feel like I kind of forgot about that. But yes, I would do the same thing where I'd be like, look at all of these children. And like, I'm sure, there's almost no possibility that none of their parents also struggled. Like there's probably a good chance that some of them went through some of this or, whatever. And yeah, it's such a good reminder of like the world goes on and like this, like it can happen and all of those kinds of things, which is
it makes you get out of your own head a little bit, Now I will say, now that we're both pregnant, I am so grateful that I have a job that I can work from home.
Same.
All you pregnant people going into the office, like, I don't know.
I know. And the classroom, I mean, I know we both had a lot of nausea and fatigue and all of that. I honestly don't know how I would have survived if I was in the classroom. Or like you said, like I was physically going to work at the time when like I became pregnant, but I was able to stay home when my morning sickness was really bad and do my job from home. Right. I almost feel like it was some crazy like destiny thing that I came out of the classroom at that time, because I think I would have had to like either quit or just like take, like a month off. Yeah, it was so hard. I mean, I was horizontal for an entire month because I just couldn't. If I sat up, like I would be sick. And so, yeah, like you said, anybody who is pregnant and in the classroom or having to do a job where you're very, active and on the whole time, like you should all be getting a raise, a major raise.
I mean, I have no words. I just like, it's amazing. I remember I was asking my mom, and my mom sometimes like, she'll be like very, very blunt. And I was asking her about what she did. And she's like, you just power through and do it. And I think that's true. Like you just like, your body will adjust, like, like, cause we're working from home, like okay, so yeah, we can go lay down or like work on the couch or whatever. But like
Right.
you adjust. Like women are amazing, like
Mhm.
resilient and incredible. Okay. So you're well into your pregnancy, right? Like how far along are you?
I am 36 weeks and 4 days today.
God, how are our emotions? How are we
Oh my
feeling?
goodness. I still like, it still has not sunk in that I am actually having a baby.
I get that a
I feel
lot,
like every night I lay in bed and I'm like, feel this, like this is real, like a baby is coming. Like obviously I'm excited. I love the baby. I am getting all ready and all of that.
Right,
but like
of course.
the actual reality of it is so like not real. Like
I get it.
But feeling good, as birth gets closer, I'm definitely getting a little bit nervous, but we have like a doula and she's been great. And trying to work on like my mindset about all of it and whatnot. But yeah, we're excited.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, like, not to freak you out, but like you're at the point where like you could have the baby at any point.
I know. I know, it's so crazy. And it's like,
so
even if
wild.
Right. And even if I don't have it like a little bit early, it's still only like 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks,
I know.
It's
so exciting. So, as we're both Montessorians, I'm almost 32 weeks. So I'm just a little bit behind you, but I'm sure you're totally in nesting mode. And because I am, it's like a thing. I like, anyway. But how are you planning to incorporate the Montessori method into your home? Are we going like 100%? Are we going 50, 75? Like, what are we doing?
I mean, my goal is, I mean, I guess what does 100% mean? I don't know.
I don't know. That was sort of a silly thing
No, but I mean,
it's
a good question. I mean, so I have like a bassinet for by the bed, the first couple months or whatever.
Sure.
But we're planning to do like a floor bed. I have that set up.
Nice.
I've gotten like the different mobiles and
Nice.
some of those like early, like grasping materials and things like that. And like a movement mat and mirror and all of those fun things. It's been really cool to, when I went through my primary training, I was really interested in the A to I and like learning more about that. So it's been cool to have like a really good excuse to kind of dive more into some of that. And I have some friends and, guides that work at the school that I work for that have been really helpful in like sharing their knowledge.
That's so awesome
as well. So yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah. I'm not doing a floor bed at first just because I don't know. It's just, I think it's just me. We have a humongous dog. There's just things that like my anxiety can't quite get there. And I was talking with Erin Smith. She's a toddler and she's A to I trainer. She's amazing. And something we interviewed her for All Things Montessori, and something she said really stuck with me. She said, "You can have a crib and still be a Montessorian." And I was like, great. I was freaking out.
Yeah.
And I was like, not gonna be doing my Montessori thing anymore. Yes. But I have the Montessori Baby by Simone Davies.
Yes.
I love this book. And she has a whole section on if you have a crib, like this is what we recommend. Like, and like they have a whole section on that. So it just made me feel a lot better because I was like panicking. But I definitely to have, a floor kind of exploration area. I have the Montessori bookshelf, which is so beautiful. I have a lengthwise mirror. I bought some artwork that I'm going to put down at the baby's level and things like that. And isn't it so cool to like do it in your own house?
Yeah.
Yes. So awesome.
Yes, that's so true. Because like we get to do it in, in our classrooms when we were in the classroom, but when it's like your actual house, like where you live, and it's like, ooh, I have like an opportunity to apply these things here as well. And it's been really interesting because, I think before like the reality of setting everything up came, I had like this whole, idea that like the whole house would just be like ready for, a baby once they start like moving and all of that. And then, the time is here and it's like, yeah, pretty much the baby's room is the only one. And it's still not even like fully baby proofed and all of that. But it was sort of a nice reality check of like, I don't have to have the whole house prepared. I think I almost wonder if it comes from like starting your classroom at the beginning of the year, right? Like it has to be ready. And,
absolutely.
Like having that mindset and being like, no, I actually don't. I can, as the baby gets older, you starting, increasing whatever is set up in your house and whatnot.
I had the same thought. I was like I was just thinking only about the kitchen. Yes. How I was going to have a shelving thing for his needs and then a table. And Xander was like, what? Like, stop. I get it. It is. It's because, and especially too, like the way that we, we're mixed age groups. So we're not just thinking about one age, we're thinking about the whole arc, right? So like in elementary, I'm thinking from 6 to 12. So I'm thinking in the future. And so it's just bizarre to like, really it's bizarre yet freeing. Yes. It's like, I don't have to do that right now. And I would do it when I'm like more rested and not crazy. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. The house doesn't have to be ready for a newborn through 3-year-old. It just has to be ready for a newborn.
Absolutely. I know that was a good lesson for me because I was like looking at like little hooks for his coats and Xander was like, when are we like, what? I
know. I was doing the same thing. And like you said with the kitchen, I was like, we moved into a different house like during my pregnancy. And I was like, oh, we can't like put anything in this low drawer because that would be like the perfect spot for like the baby's things. I'm like, okay, but like in the meantime,
I know.
For the next year or, however many months, it can have things in it. Like
we've got some time, which is really nice to remember.
Yes.
That's so funny that you did the same thing. I was sort of losing my mind there for a little bit, but like in a good way. I think it's just because of our experience. It makes sense, right? We want to think about the whole arc. We want to think through every process. I mean, that's been a really big thing for me. Because I remember when I would set up my classroom, I would think through like, okay, what's it going to be like for that child to get that material, or like, what's snack going to look like? What's this process going to look like? And I feel so grateful that I have that perspective while getting ready for this baby, because I know we'll observe and we'll learn and like things will like maybe not be what we thought they would be, but it feels nice to have that perspective of just like the thoughtfulness of thinking it through before,
Yeah. And I think I know like, as I've moved more into like a space of working more with parents, that is something that I don't think, like, I think it is an advantage that like our training and our experience in the classroom gives us, because that's not necessarily intuitive, right? For people to like stop and think through, what the scaffolding or the setup or whatever that might need to happen to have a process or a room set up like go well. Yeah, I think that will be a helpful skill all through parenting, right? To like think, okay, I'm going to use, whatever knowledge I have or my observations of my child or what have you, and be able to break down, like, how do I get to this place with them?
Absolutely. I mean, observation, I think, is going to serve us so well. I've been like recently, my obsession is just with sleep scheduling and sleep routine and everything like that. And I just like, I'm consuming like anything I can. Cause I feel like I know what I want to do, but also like, I have no idea what I'm going to do, at the same time. And I was reading the Montessori Baby yesterday and they were talking all about observation. Like, what signs tell you your baby's tired? What time? Like, and I was like, oh my God, like, right. We observe, like, again, it all just comes back to like observing the child and seeing what's going to work. And I know in the beginning, like they're not used to day and night and all those things will be weird. But like, as you keep going, like there's going to be signs and it'll get easier and easier. Yeah.
I think it'll be such a, like, I want to say challenge, but in like a good way and a bad way, to kind of like surrender to that, right? Like, especially in those newborn weeks or months, like you can't control anything, right? Like it kind of is about like the baby and what they need and what their kind of rhythm is and figuring that out. So yeah, hopefully our observation skills will serve us well.
Yeah, we'll do a postpartum episode and we'll talk about how that's going.
Check in.
Like, yeah, I was observing and then I lost my mind and then I screamed. And there's going to be a lot of interesting moments.
Yes.
I'm so excited for you though. And it's been so nice. I know IVF is traumatic and invasive and pretty negative, but it's also like so amazing that it's led to this experience for both of us. So I'm just so excited for you.
Yeah, I'm so excited for you too.
I know.
And I think it's
so close in age.
Yeah, I know. It's so cool to have people, especially like-minded people that are, going through the same kind of experience right at the same time. And yeah, we'll have to get together when the babies are both born and have them meet each other.
No, they can fall in love. And that's what I say to like everybody who's having a baby around mine. I'm like, they can fall in love or be best friends or whatever. No, it's so true. Like it is so refreshing to have like a Montessorian and a like-minded individual like that. I can really, that we can really, get down to the nitty-gritty and talk about stuff, because as I'm sure that you've noticed and I've noticed as well, like everybody parents so differently. There's like 1,000 opinions out there, probably more. And it can be stressful to like kind of get all that information. So I actually feel really grateful for Montessori that I have a baseline. Like I believe in that. So I'm going to start there. It feels really nice.
That's so true. It is like an advantage or just something like, okay, we have a starting point.
Yes, I have a base right
from scratch. Like
exactly. Yeah. Because if I didn't have that, like, I don't know, it's scary. I mean, it's scary in general, but.
Right. No, but there's so much. I mean, I think no matter what, you're figuring out what your exact parenting style and whatnot is, no matter who you are and what you might align with. But like you said, like having something, a structure or a philosophy or what have you to kind of base things off of is, I think, super valuable.
Yeah, I agree. Well, keep me posted on your baby. I wish for you all the I'm sending you all the energy of like a very quick delivery. Something that just like smooth and like, that was great.
Thank you. And sending that back to you too.
So much. And we should do maybe in 6 months, we'll do like a postpartum
we'll see how we're doing.
Yeah, we'll see what's happening. But thank you so much for being here. This has been great.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.